Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Coaching and Consulting Insight series on the Success Insight podcast. The Coaching and Consulting Insight series introduces you to coaches and consultants that work with leaders, entrepreneurs, and business owners to create their best life and achieve and perform at their full potential. Our guest today is Larry Goldstein. Larry is the author of Make Me an Offer, a guidebook for small business buyers and sellers, and he is a business broker at First Choice Business Brokers, Las Vegas. Larry, welcome to the Coaching and Consulting Insight series on the Success Insight podcast.
Thank you, Howard. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
Fantastic. And for our listeners, as I had alluded to, Larry is here in beautiful Las Vegas. It's a nice sunny day. And I met Larry because I was getting emails from him. Don't know how I got on his list, but I'm on his list. And I was intrigued by the fact that he bought and sold businesses. And on the email, there were these lists of businesses that were up for sale. And I saw a couple that I was interested in. And then I was reminded that I could potentially be swimming outside my lane, but I was really intrigued by this idea here in Las Vegas about buying and selling businesses. And so I reached out to Larry. He was gracious enough to take my call. And so again, here we are. Larry, I really fascinating business that you're in, buying and selling businesses. But before we kind of dive into what it means to be a business broker, perhaps you could share a little bit about your background with our listeners.
Well, thank you, Howard. I like to say, as a business broker now, this is my fourth career. I got out of undergraduate at University of Southern California with a degree in electrical engineering. And once I started working as an engineer, I realized that that was not going to be a lifelong endeavor for me, but I do like technology. So I went back part-time to USC. I got an MBA, and that was really a turnaround in my life. I so enjoyed learning about business and how money works and marketing, distribution. So I went out of MBA program for 10 years to IBM, where I was in the typical career track. I started as a system engineer, a marketing representative, product manager, and then a sales manager. And then I got the bug to start pursuing startup companies. So I looked for opportunities, primarily Silicon Valley based and funded companies. And that was really an eye-opening experience into entrepreneurship in the technology arena, primarily the telecommunications space at that time. And then the dot-com crash came, and the industry, of course, went through a big change, as well as the fact that in 1984, AT&T was broken up, and then the baby bells were starting to be put together again. But I stayed in technology, and I completed working for various corporations in technology in the test and equipment portion of the business. And that's how I got to Las Vegas on projects involving the data and the voice networks and equipment for City Center, a large mega resort complex here in Las Vegas. And I took the opportunity to come to Las Vegas and moved here, thoroughly enjoyed Las Vegas. Also the insight of working with a large casino company, MGM. And that was a great experience. But at the end of that project, I realized that I was ready for entrepreneurship. And so I began the process of thinking, do I want to buy a business or do I want to start a business from scratch? I was ready to move on from the corporate America life. And after taking a year and looking at various opportunities and thinking about starting up various things, looking at franchises, starting up on my own, I determined and decided to buy a business through a business broker here in Las Vegas. And that business was one that collected, recycled, empty ink and toner cartridges for printers, and then we remanufactured them, and then we sold them. And I bought that business with the idea that I was going to turn that business around. It was in a decline, and I wanted to sell it 3 to 5 years after the turnaround. And that's a really important point, is I had the view that I was turning it around. It wasn't going to be my life's work any longer. And that changed the way that I actually focused on the business, the investments I made, and how I spent my time. And I'm happy to say that I did sell my business 2 weeks prior to the 5th anniversary of the purchase in 2016. And then I thought I was retired. And after a couple of years, start to realize, what do I really miss? And what I miss is within the small business community and those coaches and influencers who work with small businesses, really miss the business to business networking. I miss the industry events with just terrifically brilliant speakers. And I miss conversations with other business owners. And so I made the determination to become a business broker. And I have been doing that now. I'm in my 3rd year, and it has just been absolutely an enlightening experience to see how business owners and business buyers approach the marketplace. And in some cases, how they're very aligned with the way that the market works, and others to find out and to try to coach them into how the marketplace really works, whether it's evaluation or whether it's the process of purchasing a business and getting financing. And that's what brings me here today in speaking with you about my career, my 4th career, being a business broker.
Wow, that is quite the journey. And I love the little pivots, for the sake of a better metaphor, that you have taken. And I'm wondering if you could, like to kind of circle back on a couple items that you shared with us, maybe to get a little bit more elaboration, if you're okay with that, Larry.
Sure, absolutely.
When you came up through the technology, the engineering, and you went back, you've got your MBA. It sounded like that MBA, at least the MBA back when you received it, was really a big change or opportunity for you to begin to explore outside of what perhaps at the moment was your comfort zone of engineering, or just doing the work of the big corporation.
Yes, getting the MBA was absolutely a right turn in my career. It was focused. It was premeditated. I knew that I wanted to stop wiring circuit boards, designing logic patterns using Texas Instrument chipsets. I knew I didn't want to continue to program in Fortran and spend hours and hours and hours writing programs. So the MBA absolutely was a premeditated, a predetermined reason to get into an area, particularly all phases of business, but narrowing down into ultimately business to business sales of large enterprise accounts with IBM and then with other companies that I've been with. And that was absolutely a right turn that was turned around my career and put me forward into learning much, much more, not only about business and applying myself, but I learned a lot about myself. And I will say that each different career that I have done, each different career has taught me a great deal more about business, about the way that business works, the way the interaction with technology, which is so important, and all businesses depend on technology today. But really, that was the right turn in my career. And I will never look back with any regret.
Okay. When did the mindset of entrepreneurship begin to take hold then? Because you got the MBA, and I asked this because I could do a Google search on business programs, MBA programs, and there's usually a subspecialty within that MBA of focus on entrepreneurship. So maybe it's a little bit more prescriptive 2022. But back when you were completing that MBA and you began to use a lot of what you learned, when did the entrepreneurship aspect begin to also then take hold for you?
And that's a really good point. USC, University of Southern California, did have and has had a long time program in entrepreneurship. But because I was an evening and a summer student for the MBA, that wasn't really an option for me. That was more for their core. But looking at that, of course, if I could go back, that would be a fascinating view. I focused in on marketing and sales when I did my MBA, but the lessons that one can learn about entrepreneurship going in through a program would be invaluable. But until you face those decisions, until you have to make decisions about really what you're going to invest in your business, until you have to literally negotiate with the landlord, until you have to determine employees, how you're going to hire. And unfortunately, when you need to let employees go for various reasons, whether it's for attitude or actually performance, you must immerse yourself into being an entrepreneur to actually get the full lessons and the full experience and ultimately to be able to share with others your perspective. So to answer your question, which is a very good question, it's a great background, and I'd encourage anybody thinking about becoming an entrepreneur to pursue that in a academic situation, but still be prepared that you're going to be immersed in many things that come at you every day, that academic experience is not going to really be able to cover. They can give you tools, they can teach you how to think through it, they can give you the ability to look at the beginning and look at the path and put together some strategic plans on any kind of situation. But until you actually look that employee in the eye, or you look that vendor in the eye and determine whether you're going to make a commitment to them, you really have to be there.
Okay. Okay. And as we perhaps differentiate the aspects of entrepreneurship, you mentioned you had this decision: do I buy a business or do I start one from scratch? When you were going through your program, I would imagine you came across your fellow students who had this idea they're going to go one direction or the other. How did you begin to make that decision? Like, I don't want the start from scratch path. I would rather go down the buy and go down the path you took of turning it around and then selling it.
Right. And I would say that there's two factors that come to mind. One is the place where you are in your life and what it means to have cash flow and financial assets would be a really big concern and consideration. And then the other would be just how willing are you as an individual to roll the dice? And for me, I decided in the end to purchase a business because I was in my 50s at that point in time. So being able to build upon my nest egg savings, which I was investing in purchasing a business with immediate cash flow, immediate customers, and immediate brand already set up, and a location which was built out, a facility which was already built out. In the end, for me, was both my demeanor, my attitude towards risk, my risk adverse nature, as well as just what appeared to me the common sense approach that since I did have the ability to purchase a business, I had the financial assets, it just made sense to have cash flow day one. When I owned that business and we opened this store that day, that was a big, big factor in my decision. And that is a big factor in every conversation I have with people who want to buy a business. Why do you want to buy a business compared to starting? And really the biggest reason I would say is it's already up, it's already going, and I've got cash flow on day one. I don't really worry as a, I don't have to worry about when those first cash flow, those first dollars are going to come in. I don't have to worry about necessarily how I'm going to meet payroll or how I'm going to pay vendors, because that's already moving in place. That's what you're buying when you buy an existing business.
I love that. For the spirit of full disclosure, I think my demeanor is very much the same. I mean, I am an entrepreneur. I mean, I was let go from my tech company that I worked for. Luckily, I was making my pivot into coaching and leadership development. But even being a coach today, it's entrepreneurial. I'm starting things from scratch. I sometimes look back, Larry, and also in full disclosure, I wish I had had an MBA because they don't teach you how to run a business in coach training and getting your master's in leadership. But that's a whole other conversation. In that case, you'd be the host of the podcast, and I'd be the guest sharing my story. As you began then to take on business ownership and I get the industry, the buying, you've got the cartridges and the refurbishing of those. I would imagine too, just given the timing, the technology has changed so much. And I'm curious, are photocopiers and cartridges the same today, 2022 versus way back in 2016, which is not too long ago? Or is technology evolving that maybe that business is not, maybe you would not have made that same decision today that you made back in 2016 or before?
Right. And that you are absolutely right. And it's technology, but it's also the business model that the vendors are using today. So a couple of things were becoming very, very clear. The vendors were starting to use processor chips inside of the ink and toner cartridges to ensure and to make it very, very difficult for third parties to be able to remanufacture or to basically copy non-OEM cartridges and have them work. So they would start to change the firmware within the machines. And so a cartridge would work one day and the next day, the cartridge wouldn't work. And that was a big change in the industry. In the inkjet industry, they started to go to the tanks, or the on-demand type of cartridge would be shipped to you, which meant that consumers didn't necessarily have to go to Amazon, and they didn't have to go to Staples, and they didn't have to go to the small business ink and toners. They would just get it sent from Hewlett Packard or Canon or Epson on demand. And the photocopiers, the large photocopiers, Xerox, Ricoh, they for a long time had tried to lock customers in on the pay per page. So the toner would, quote unquote, be included, and the customers would get a certain baseline of how many pages, black and white or color. But then anything above that baseline, they would start paying charge on a per page basis. So that industry was changing, and I've seen it continue to change, certainly with the on-demand supplies coming from the vendors. So they're trying to cut out their channels as well. If you notice, Staples, Office Depot, Walmart, they all still have a section for toner and for ink, but they don't advertise it like they used to, and they don't emphasize it like they used to. And that's probably because of the continuing channels coming straight from the manufacturers.
Right. And I do remember, I mean, it would always amaze me. In fact, I have my HP computer printer right next to me that it didn't it didn't cost nearly as much as 2 or 3 replacement cartridges. So it's definitely a moneymaker for them. But
well, we used to say a vial of blood was not as expensive as the ink in an ink cartridge on a
Well,
per ounce basis. And I
right.
think that's still very, very true.
I think you're right. So you successfully navigated your exit from this business, and maybe you played some golf or tennis or whatever your sport of choice is. When did you begin to then really start to focus on the brokering of businesses, the buying and selling?
Howard, thanks for asking. That's a great story. And it's just one of those serendipitous types of things that happens in life. My wife is from Cincinnati. We were back visiting family in Cincinnati, and one of her brothers asked me to stop by the house. I had no idea why he wanted me to stop by his house. But I went by, and he was in the construction industry. He was starting to think about retiring, and he knew I had sold my business. And we had a 2-hour conversation about what it meant to get a business ready for sale, what it meant to go to the marketplace. And he had never, ever thought about or conceived of the concepts of how to go to market and how to get your business ready. He thought he would call some of his friends in the Cincinnati area. And of course, one of them would be more than happy to buy his business. And after a 2-hour conversation, hoped that I gave him some important things to think about at that time, but it really put the light bulb on and illuminated my thinking that said conversations like this with business owners who are getting ready to sell, those of us baby boomers, and really any business owner who's ready to sell, it was just a fascinating day for me to have that conversation and realize, A, I had been through the experience, I could share that experience, and B, I really knew that I could help and impact people's lives. And so that was the moment. That was the event. That was in April of the year I decided to become a business broker. And ultimately, that 2-hour conversation is what really made me think and launch me into becoming a business broker.
3 words come to mind as you were describing it, and I love the story. One, you had the business knowledge, so thank you again, USC, for being there for you. You had the experience having bought and sold your own business, and perhaps even more important, you took the time to have a conversation, and however long it was, 1 hour, 2 hours, but this conversation is what really, and even in the coaching profession, is all the difference. It's sitting there listening, understanding what their concerns are, what their needs are, and helping them make the best possible decision. When you went on then to become a business broker, what type of training, credentialing did you need in order to put your quote unquote shingle up on the door frame?
Well, thank you. And that too is a good question. And that varies state by state. In Nevada, Nevada is one of the stricter states. You must have a real estate salesperson license or a real estate broker license. And then it's a business broker permit, which rides on top of the salesperson license for real estate. I don't know exactly the number of hours that the real estate school is, and then you take a state test and a national test. And then the business broker permit is a 24-hour in class, at least pre-COVID. That was a 24-hour in class and then a state test that one takes to get a business broker permit. And in Nevada, that's good for 1 year. And then you must go back and take more classes and to be able to go on to the 2-year cycle for continuing education. The other criteria that must be done in Nevada is you must have your license held by a broker. And a broker ultimately has legal responsibility for everything that a agent or a salesperson does. All contracts are actually done between the client and the broker, and then the broker must sign off and oversee many of the phases that I go through in the process of helping business buyers buy a business and business sellers sell their business. So Nevada is actually one of the more regulated and stricter states. Some states have no regulations whatsoever. California, you just have to have a real estate license. They don't have any separate permitting or licensing for business brokers. So it's really a state by state discussion as far as what it takes to get your entry in the door and put your name up on the door.
Okay. For the real estate broker, is their specialty typically commercial real estate? I imagine it, or residential. I have a feeling I know what the answer might be, but what is their specialty typically?
Well, a broker is somebody who oversees the entire process and they can oversee agents. In my world of being a business broker, I work very closely with commercial real estate agents. I have a very definitive feeling that that's not my expertise. And yet real estate, whether it's somebody buying or selling a building as part of a business or negotiating a lease to be able to take over a business, whether it's an assignment or a brand new lease, that's not my expertise. And I choose to partner with commercial real estate agents. As far as residential real estate agents, I don't come across those in my role as a business broker very frequently.
Okay. Now, when you have a client come to you, are they typically they're looking to sell their business, or they want to talk to you about it? They're looking to buy. Is it a 50-50 split, or is there one skewed more to the other just based on maybe your specific area specialty?
Right. Very good question. And for me, it's about 50-50. Speaking with people who want to sell their business, and I am very candid and very matter of fact in some of these things. I am happy to do evaluation for any business owner. That's something that I do at no cost, no obligation. But there are times when I can tell a business seller, you have a terrific business. You have many of not only the objective criteria for selling a business, but you have many of the subjective criteria that buyers are looking for in place. And I may make some suggestions to them. They may not have management in place who's going to stay and remain with the business, which gives the buyer great comfort in moving forward with the purchase of a business. I've had situations where they have a very undesirable lease, and I will tell them that. I will give them my absolute straightforward feedback in addition to evaluation. With buyers who aren't really settled in or what they are interested in, what they're looking for, what I will typically do is I will give them 3 of my listings, 3 totally different industries and different models. And I'll say, I want you to review the business profiles of these 3 businesses, and then I'll take time and we'll beat up those 3. So one might be a professional services, home healthcare business, which has really no assets, but your personnel is the key to your business. I may give them a business that has a high capital asset, such as a fleet of trucks. So maybe it's an HVAC business. And then others I will give them maybe something that's very trendy, an e-commerce business, something where it's going to take a certain technical understanding and technical basis, and maybe a business where it's really about sales. And I'll beat that up. I'll take time with those buyers and I will sit with them and we'll beat it up and we'll do the pros and the cons within their own context of their lives and their own personal goals. And that's how I approach working with both buyers and sellers.
Okay. When someone is trying to sell the business, and I would imagine there's multiple reasons why somebody wants to sell, and you probably could list like the top 5 reasons. What's the the emotional side of this journey for them and also for you, because I can imagine it gets back to one of your epiphanies when you were speaking to family back in Ohio is you had to listen, you sit there and listen to this person. What's the going on in their heads? I mean, it's I can imagine it's not an easy thing to give up this little child of yours.
It can be very difficult, but there are various reasons, as you said, and I would be happy to share quickly just a couple of the various reasons for
Sure,
why people sell.
sure.
But what I can say is the most dangerous thing for anybody thinking of selling a business is once you make that decision to sell, you have a conversation. If you're going to sell it through an intermediary, such as myself, a business broker, you have to keep your foot on the gas pedal. It's too easy for people to think once they sell their business, they start to see the dollar signs, they start to feel the money in their pocket, and they stop doing the work that's necessary to, first of all, keep their business going on the trajectory that it's on. And second of all, to keep maintaining and the confidentiality of the fact that they are listing their business. Confidentiality and continuing the trajectory are very, very difficult. And so anybody who's a business owner here, I would just continue to tell them, you've got to focus on running your business. You've got to focus on maintaining confidentiality, because that will totally kill a deal. That will cost you money and put you in a situation where you may not be able to sell your business, let alone keep your key employees if the confidentiality is broken. Reasons, just real quick, that I have worked with. I had a woman well in her 60s. She's been in the salon and spa business her entire life. She decided she wanted to make a change or retire, but she wanted to stay working in the business as a stylist. But the rigors of owning the business, promoting the business, hiring, firing independent stylists, estheticians, massage therapists just became too much for her. So she was referred to me by a business attorney in town who I networked with. I met this woman and I knew she wanted to sell, but she was very pragmatic. And Howard, I've got to tell you, very, very satisfying for me is this woman, when we finally closed the deal in late December of last year, she cried. She hugged me. She cried. She was so happy and filled with joy and relief that she could move on to the next phase of her life. And that is very, very touching. I must say that was very, very touching. I had others where a client was referred to me by an estate attorney because the seller of the business had passed. One of her daughters, the sellers or the person who actually owned and maintained the business, had passed. A daughter took it over, had really no experience with the business, and being able to find a buyer and be able to add a little bit to their inheritance for a business that it was really going down very, very quickly as far as revenue and really the reputation of the business. That too was very, very satisfying. I've put people into retirement. I've put people into points where they could sell a business and move on to other interests, other businesses that they might have. And that is a really important and very satisfying point, is when I help people get into the next point of their life, whatever that is.
I love that. And I have to say, Larry, your example with the individual that wanted the woman that wanted to sell her stylist salon business, but wanted to stay in it to work just as doing the actual delivery of the service. Because that was a question I was going to ask is, do you come across sellers who, when they have a prospective buyer, that buyer wants the seller to stick around for a little while?
Yes. And that is a really, really critical point that in itself we could take quite a bit of time speaking about. Different businesses will have different kinds of requirements. And one of the things that makes a business very sellable is that everything does not center around, all decisions and knowledge does not center around a sole person. Whether the seller is absentee or very involved in their business, if they're absentee, it still may be one general manager who knows and handles everything with the business. And that is a danger spot for buyers. That increases dramatically the risk. So buyers often will want somebody, a seller or the key person, to remain. And so an employment contract will often become part of a deal. Likewise, and in the era of COVID, with additional uncertainty as to how a business performs, because we know some businesses performed better than they had in 2019, and others performed far worse than they did pre-COVID. An earnout is very, very common. And an earnout, to put it very simply, says, I agree, I'm the buyer, I agree to pay you $500,000 for your business, but I'm going to pay you $300,000 today. And over the next 2 years, we're going to spread this out quarterly, biannually, annually, based on certain marks, performance indicators that we choose and agree on as part of the deal. So earnouts really give the need for the seller to be very concerned and to be very confident, and that's the key word, confident in how their business is set and positioned. When a seller will not offer any form of seller carry, seller financing, where seller acts as a bank, really can be a red flag for a buyer. Even if it's a tiny bit, even if it's 5% or 10% of the sales price. And by the way, these notes do get interest paid. Interest is imputed into this carry note. But when a seller is very hesitant, and they always start the conversation with me saying, of course, they all want their cash. They want to leave immediately, have their cash, and they want to get on that sailboat or whatever the case, they want to get on that riverboat cruise in Europe or whatever they want to do. They want vacations. Whenever they start that way and they don't become through the sales process more willing to take a seller carry note, that can be a gigantic red flag for a buyer. And oh, by the way, when financing is offered through conventional financing or more often through SBA financing to a buyer, financial institution will typically ask the seller to take a second. And then we have to turn to the seller and say, you really have no choice. If you're going to sell this business at $500,000, at $1 million, and you expect somebody to have that in their pocket compared to somebody coming in with $100,000 and getting financing, you've really, really narrowed the pool of potential buyers, really putting the opportunity and the odds of selling your business at a very small level. So these are some of the discussions that I have every single day.
I love it. I love it. And it's fascinating. And I have only been peripherally aware of what's going on, in the buying and selling of businesses. And so I mean, I appreciate, Larry, this kind of conversation. And one thing is really dawning on me, and as I share with many of my podcast guests, I'm an opportunistic podcaster. I would imagine there are some phenomenal stories to be told through your work with your potential sellers and buyers. I mean, stories are fascinating, and I'm very much interested in the people, the mindset, the emotion of what's next, what's your plan B after this is over. But really some phenomenal stories, fascinating stories. I appreciate you, sharing a few of those with us.
It's absolutely my pleasure.
Larry, before we head out, and I want to be able to share your website and your social sites, any final insight to go that you would like to leave with our listeners? And the reason we call it Insight to Go, it's kind of a play on words, Success Insight podcast, but we love when our guests can share, an anecdote, a quote, an article, a book, obviously your book, about what's what's important for you that you want to then share with our listeners. So for today, Larry, what's your insight to go?
Yeah, thank you. And when I owned my business, I really learned the concept of trusted advisors. And whether a person is looking to sell their business or buy a business, to do it themselves is almost a fool's undertaking. I got to say, I used an organization, I participated in their trainings and their mentorship here in Las Vegas called SCORE, which is a nonprofit that is associated with the Small Business Administration. And that began my learning process. At that same time, when I really started to narrow in, I brought my wealth manager and his expertise into the process. And when I was looking at businesses, I engaged the services of a business attorney because I was being handed, not so much concerned about non-disclosures, but I was starting to be handed contracts and other things that I knew I was going to have to deal with. And so the insight to go that I would tell anybody entering or trying to exit a business is form your team of trusted advisors. They don't necessarily have to be on a fee basis. There are industry organizations of people with experience who have been through the buying or the selling and acquiring other businesses. So whether it's people in the construction industry, people in the health industry, there are in every single city, there are industry organizations and business organizations. Go, join, participate, listen to the speakers, ask questions, do your reading, form your own group of trusted advisors. These people will be invaluable to you as you go through the process.
I love this. I truly love this, Larry. This was fantastic. And I have to say, I am a big fan of SCORE. I use them in Chicago. I probably didn't use them as much as I should have, but again, it's a whole other story where you're the podcast host and I'm the guest. But such a wonderful organization. And I, on a regular basis, for some of my coaching clients that are looking to venture off on their own, is to check out their local SCORE offices. What a great service. And I love the term trusted advisors and having your team with you, because as you rightly said, you can't go this alone. Larry, I really enjoyed this conversation. We do a lot of outdoor work. We do some book authors. We do other aspects of coaching and consulting, but this conversation today around business, buying and selling of businesses, I just thought it's fascinating. And I'm so glad I'm getting your emails and you and I have met, and I hope you're here in Las Vegas. So am I. We're going to hopefully sit down in the future, have a cup of coffee, and I just love chatting with you. So thank you for taking time out of your day. And I was about ready to go on to close the podcast, but then I realized, Larry, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
Well, thank you, Howard. And I too thoroughly enjoyed the conversation today. As you can tell, this is really a passion. It's far more than just a vocation. This is a passion for me. And people can get information from me. My website is bizbrokernevada.com, BIZBROKER Nevada.com, Bizbroker Nevada. I can be found in LinkedIn, Larry Goldstein, Las Vegas. I also have a presence on Instagram, a business page on Facebook, and a YouTube channel, which I'm starting to diligently work on putting on content which will help explain and add to many of the concepts that we spoke about today.
Fantastic. Well, Larry, we appreciate again you taking the time and to chat with us today, and we are going to provide all the backlinks to the website and the social sites, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So, Larry, again, thank you. Stay on the line. We're going to do a quick close, and then you and I can have a final chat. Okay?
Super. Thank you.
All right, folks. This is a pretty interesting episode. So, if you are interested in any way of buying and selling a business, find a business broker, talk to them, go do a Google search in your local community. And of course, if you're here in Las Vegas, well, I got the guy for you, Larry Goldstein. And really just phenomenal conversation. I mean, Larry was gracious enough to spend quite a bit of time with us. We kind of heard a little bit about his journey, and then we eventually evolved into the buying and selling of businesses, not just the technical aspect, but the mindset aspect, and really the insights to go, the finding help, whether it's your local score office, assembling your team, the attorneys, other professionals who are crucial to that decision. And really this idea of trusted advisor. I mean, we should all have a team of trusted advisors, and who knows, maybe you're a trusted advisor on someone else's team. Folks, do go out and visit Larry's website, businessbrokernevada.com. And again, we're going to provide all the backlinks to social sites, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode on the Coaching and Consulting Insight series and the Success Insight podcast, check us out on successinsightpodcast.com. You can also find us on our Facebook and LinkedIn pages for Success Insight Podcast and all of the major podcasting platforms, including Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, and Audible, and Amazon Music for that matter. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we will see you on a future episode of the Coaching and Consulting Insight series on the Success Insight podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.